there is a type of karma that not only marks destiny, but silently corrodes the very root of the soul. Among all the errors that human beings can commit, physical, emotional, or mental, there exists one deeper, more dangerous, and with almost irreversible consequences: the misuse of spiritual energy. Because energy is not merely invisible force, it is the essence of life, the breath that moves every cell, the current that connects every being to the universe. When this energy is diverted from its true function, elevation, healing, expansion, and used to manipulate, control, harm, bark, or gain selfish advantages, the negative impact is devastating. Buddha said that the mind creates the world. Yogananda taught that energy shapes reality, and both warned, what you do with your energy returns multiplied, engraved in your being much more intensely than any physical action. This is why certain practices, apparently harmless, can transform into heavy chains that imprison the soul for lifetimes. The darkest karma is not born from a thoughtless gesture, but from the conscious decision to use light to generate shadow. Today, you will understand why the misuse of energy is considered the worst of karmas, how it infiltrates the most subtle recesses of existence, and how only a truly inclusive heart, capable of seeing the world as part of itself, can dissolve this burden. Prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear may forever transform the way you deal with your own life force. There exists an invisible force that governs all human destinies, a law as precise as gravity, as implacable as time: karma. But few know that not all actions are equal before this cosmic law. Some imprint themselves lightly upon the surface of the soul, others penetrate to the deepest layers of being, creating cycles that extend through entire existences. And there is one category of action that, when misdirected, becomes the most terrible of spiritual poisons: energetic action. Today, you will discover why using your own vital energy to harm others is considered the worst type of karma a human being can create. Not merely because it multiplies suffering in the world, but because it transforms the practitioner into the architect of their own spiritual prison. Prepare yourself for a journey that will reveal the most hidden secrets of karmic law and how to free yourself from its bonds through supreme inclusivity. When we speak of karma, most understand only its superficial definition: action. But what few perceive is that there exists a hidden hierarchy among actions, a scale of intensity that determines how deeply each choice etches itself into the substance of our soul. At the top of this invisible pyramid stand physical actions, visible, measurable, limited by time and space. Descending one step, we encounter emotional actions, more subtle than gestures, yet charged with a magnetic force that attracts similar experiences like spiritual magnets. Deeper still are mental actions, where repeated thoughts crystallize into tendencies, molding character and determining future births. But in the deepest core of this hierarchy rests energetic action, the conscious mobilization of life force to influence reality. Imagine a crystalline lake. A stone thrown at the surface creates waves that soon dissipate. This is physical action. A larger stone, hurled with force, generates undulations that take longer to calm. These are emotional and mental actions. But when someone pours ink into the bottom of this lake, the color spreads slowly, reaching all the water for a very long time. This is energetic action, which contaminates or purifies the entire psychic atmosphere of the practitioner. Energetic action is different because it mobilizes the very essence of that divine spark that connects us to the Creator. When this sacred force is directed toward good, it becomes a channel of infinite blessings. When perverted to cause harm, it transforms into the most terrible of curses, one that falls primarily upon the practitioner, for it violates the fundamental nature of vital energy, which is always to create, heal, and unite. Why does energetic action possess such devastating impact upon the practitioner's karma? The answer lies in the very nature of vital energy. It knows no boundaries between self and other. between executor and target. When you mobilize your inner force to harm someone, you are literally poisoning the very well from which your soul drinks. Energy is like water. It assumes the form of the container that holds it. If the container of your heart is contaminated by the intention to harm, all energy that flows through it will carry that toxic vibration. And herein lies the cruelest paradox. The more powerful your energetic capacity, the more deeply you contaminate yourself by using it incorrectly. It is like using a scalpel to destroy instead of heal. The same precision that could save lives becomes an instrument of devastation. Let me share with you the story of a disciple who, after years of spiritual discipline, developed the capacity to influence events through mental concentration. Proud of his powers, he decided to use them to humiliate a business rival. Within months, he managed to financially ruin the man. However, the energy he mobilized carried the vibration of destruction, and it began to corrode his own life. He lost inner peace, his health deteriorated, and his most cherished relationships fell apart. The power he thought was advantage revealed itself as a curse, for energy, once contaminated, does not distinguish between the intended target and the source that emitted it. Correct practice, therefore, demands a purity of intention that goes beyond the simple absence of malice. It requires a heart so expanded that it becomes incapable of seeing any being as separate from itself. Only when energy flows through a channel purified by universal compassion does it maintain its divine nature, healing instead of harming, liberating instead of enslaving. And here we arrive at the point that almost no one dares consider. There exists an error even graver than directly using energy to harm. It is hiring others to do it. Many believe they can escape karmic consequence by delegating destructive action to third parties, whether through works or commissioned rituals. But this is the most dangerous of spiritual illusions. When you pay someone to direct negative energy against another, you are not merely creating an action karma, you are creating a multiplied intention karma. It is like lighting a candle to ask for protection while simultaneously hiring someone to burn down your neighbor's house. Energetic hypocrisy generates a dissonance so profound in the soul that it may take several incarnations to resolve. In the most ancient traditions, there existed knowledge about how to manipulate subtle forces to cause harm. Practices, sacred texts, not to be followed, avoided. This knowledge was guarded not as treasure, but as properly labeled poison. True sages knew these techniques only to better protect their disciples from them. True spiritual protection is never built through attack, but through elevation of one's own vibration. When your heart becomes an altar of universal compassion, when your mind purifies itself of all desire for revenge, when your energy consecrates itself entirely to divine service, then you become invulnerable to any negative force, for there is nothing left in you that resonates with destruction. But how does a soul walk from occasional thoughts of irritation to the deliberate practice of destructive, energetic actions? This process follows a fatal progression that few recognize until it is too late. First come negative thoughts, fleeting desires that something bad should happen to those who have crossed us. These thoughts, by themselves, have a subtle but real impact on the energetic field. When these thoughts become charged with emotion, when irritation transforms into hatred, when the desire for revenge inflames the heart, the impact intensifies dramatically. Emotion is the fuel that transforms thoughts into magnetic forces capable of attracting circumstances. It is like adding fire to a draft. What was merely idea becomes burning reality. The most dangerous step occurs when these thoughts and emotions crystallize into physical action. Rituals, practices, conscious mobilization of energy to influence events. Each layer adds density to the karmic impression, like layers of varnish that, once dried, become increasingly difficult to remove. What began as momentary irritation transforms into a permanent mark upon the soul. Wisdom consists in interrupting this process at its origin. The moment the first thought of malice arises, immediately replace it with a thought of blessing. Do not allow negative emotion to find fuel in your mind. And never, never, allow this energy to crystallize into action. Constant vigilance over one's own thoughts is the first and most important spiritual discipline. We now arrive at the heart of a crucial question. Why do spiritual initiations require a level of ethical maturity that many do not understand? The answer is simple and terrifying. Initiation dramatically potentializes the practitioner's energetic capacity, and with great power comes a responsibility that can determine the destiny of several lives. A true master will never grant advanced techniques to a disciple whose heart still harbors divisions, whose boundaries are still narrow, whose compassion still discriminates between mine and others. For delivering spiritual power to an immature character is like placing dynamite in a child's hands. The result will always be catastrophic, especially for the one who handles it. Before any serious initiation, true masters make a demand that may seem impossible: become mother to the entire world. This is not a poetic metaphor, but a precise technical prescription. Only when the heart expands to the point of being incapable of seeing any being as enemy, only when the mind embraces all creation as its own family, is it safe to awaken the deepest forces of the soul. The supreme test lies not in the capacity to perform extraordinary phenomena, but in the total absence of desire to use them for personal advantage. A disciple ready for initiation is one who, upon receiving divine powers, feels only the weight of responsibility to serve, never the temptation to control or impress. This inner transformation must happen before the expansion of energetic capacity, never after. And what happens when someone experiences dramatic energetic changes without having developed corresponding ethical maturity? The warning signs are clear to those who know how to recognize them. An urgency to demonstrate new powers arises, a subtle satisfaction in impressing others, a growing sense of spiritual superiority. These rapid transformations actually constitute a disguised moral test. Potentialized energy functions like a mirror that amplifies the true quality of character. If there is purity, it shines even more intensely. If there is hidden ego or malice, these also magnify dangerously. This is why many who seek spiritual powers end up in worse conditions than when they began. The parable of the fruit tree perfectly illustrates this principle. A young tree, forced to bear fruit before developing deep roots, may produce some beautiful fruits in the first season, but soon dies from exhaustion. Similarly, spiritual powers developed rapidly without the solid foundation of inner purity may produce some impressive miracles, but inevitably lead to spiritual ruin. The wise approach is always to cultivate first the garden of the heart, remove all weeds of selfishness, plant seeds of compassion, water daily with the discipline of inclusivity. Only when this garden is mature and flourishing is it safe to allow the rarest fruits of spiritual power to appear naturally. But how can destructive karma already created be reversed? How can a heart contaminated by the practice of negative energies purify itself and find redemption? The answer lies in a practice apparently simple, but revolutionary in its effects: the systematic cultivation of universal inclusivity. This practice demands that you completely reformulate your relationship with all beings. See each person not as stranger, friend, or enemy, but as your own spiritual child. When a heart truly embraces this perspective, it becomes impossible to wish harm to any creature, for what mother would desire suffering for her own children? Inclusivity is not a feeling that arises spontaneously, but a discipline that must be cultivated through specific exercise. Begin each day by sending thoughts of blessing to 3 categories of people: those you love, those for whom you feel indifference, and, most importantly, those who awaken irritation or resentment. With time, this practice dissolves the artificial barriers that divide your heart. The effect of this discipline upon karma is almost magical. When the heart becomes truly inclusive, the energy that flows through it can no longer carry destructive vibration. It is like purifying a river at its source. all water that flows from there becomes crystalline. Sincere practice of universal inclusivity can dissolve up to 90% of accumulated negative karma, for it transforms the very quality of consciousness that creates future action. For those who walk the spiritual path, there is a sacred protocol that must precede any energetic practice: the daily test of intention. Before mobilizing any subtle force, ask yourself 3 fundamental questions. Whom does this action serve? What truly moves me to practice it? Can I fully accept all consequences it will generate? If any of these questions reveal selfish motivations, desire to impress, need to control, thirst for personal advantage, immediately suspend the practice. Even apparently beneficial actions, such as attempts at healing or protection, can generate negative karma if they spring from a heart still divided between serving and dominating. The true measure of spiritual maturity lies not in the capacity to perform extraordinary phenomena, but in the wisdom to abstain from them until purity of motivation is absolute. It is better to remain years without using spiritual powers than to use them once with impure intention, for a single incorrect use can erase decades of spiritual progress. Always seek guidance from a master who demands not demonstrations of power, but evidence of selfless service. The true guru will never be impressed by your siddhis, but will be enchanted by your capacity to see God in all beings. This is the only credential that matters in the realm of spirit, and the only true protection against the dangers of misdirected power. The definitive cure for negative karma does not happen through penances or purification ritual, but through fundamental transformation of the motivation that guides our. When every thought, every word, every gesture springs from genuine desire to serve the greater good, the very nature of karma transforms. It ceases to be a prison and becomes a ladder to liberation. Conscious service possesses a unique alchemical quality. It automatically transmutes all energies that flow through it. Even actions that could generate karma, when performed in a spirit of divine offering, become seeds of freedom. It is like the difference between stagnant water, which can rot, and flowing water, which purifies itself constantly through movement. Practice seeing each moment of your life as an opportunity to serve, not only in great heroic actions, but in small daily gestures. A gentle word for one who suffers, a thought of blessing for one who irritated you, a silent prayer for world peace while walking down the street. These small offerings create an atmosphere of sanctity around your life that naturally neutralizes any destructive karma. The final secret is to understand that you are not the author of your actions, but an instrument through which divinity works in the world. When this perception becomes constant experience, when every action springs from this consciousness of sacred instrumentality, karma ceases to be a law that imprisons and reveals itself as a force that liberates, for there is no longer a separate I to be bound by its consequences. The journey we have traveled today has revealed a truth both simple and revolutionary. Karma is not a system of cosmic punishment, but a mechanism of divine learning. And energetic action, when correctly understood, becomes not a threat to be feared, but a sacred power to be developed with supreme reverence. The worst karma exists only when we use our life force against its own nature, which is always to love, heal, and unite. True spiritual protection is not found in defense techniques or purification rituals, but in transforming the heart into an altar of universal inclusivity. When there is no one left in the entire universe whom you could consider an enemy, when your energy flows naturally in blessings for all creation, you become invulnerable, not because you built walls, but because you became an ocean of love in which no destructive vibration can find echo. If these words have awakened in you recognition of your own spiritual journey, if they have touched deep chords of your soul that yearn for purification and freedom, then let your gratitude transform into action. Touch the like, so that more thirsting souls may find this oasis of wisdom. Subscribe to this channel to continue walking with us along the paths of spiritual truth. Share this message with all those who sincerely seek the light, and in the comments, share your own perceptions of how inclusivity has transformed your life. For each sincere testimony becomes a blessing for our entire community of seekers. May the light of eternal wisdom illuminate every step of your journey. May your heart expand until it embraces all creation as family. May your energy become a pure channel of divine blessings, healing where there are wounds, uniting where there is division, loving where there is fear. And may you find, in the constant practice of universal inclusivity, the golden key that opens the doors of final liberation.